This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
It's happening.
It's in the air.
The time is now.
We're all waking up.
We're waking up.
We're all waking up.
It's all shifting.
New vibrations.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me.
It's all of us.
Together.
A new time.
A new day.
A new energy.
A new energy.
New reality.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
NewRealityTV.com.
The Love Tuner is a revolutionary breathing and meditation device that combines a simple yet profound breathing exercise with the 528 Hz frequency, bringing you into a state of instant relaxation. The Love Tuner is a stylish necklace that comes beautifully packaged in an elegant premium gift box. Pull the Love Tuner out of the cap and place the rounded side with the engraved Love Tuner logo between your lips. Blow into the Love Tuner gently, like on a flute, to create a smooth, long note with a constant volume. You can make the note last as long as you like. After exhaling, inhale through your nose, allowing air to flow into the center of your body. Just leave the Love Tuner between your lips as you inhale, and then exhale again with the next note. Repeat as long as it feels good. We recommend at least 6 breathing cycles. After tuning, enjoy the silence and your fully tuned state of being. Caution: love tuning may cause miracles.
To get your Love Tuner, just click the QR code on the screen or click the link below in the show notes. Hey, welcome to World Awakenings, a fast track to enlightenment, the show that wants to know, really know, about what lay beyond our 3D physical world, and to discover all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. I'm your host, Carl Gruber, so welcome. Now, in year number 8 of this show, we continue to bring the world's top experts, masters, and teachers in these areas as we continue our quest. And don't forget, you can now not only watch this show on YouTube, but also on the brand new TV network, New Reality TV. Just click the link below in the show notes to access it now. All right, off to meet our guest, and our guest is, for today's show, Dr. Holly Duckworth, who returns to the show after her initial visit with us 3 years ago. Wow, that long ago. With a PhD in psychology, she integrates clinical insight and spiritual exploration in her work as a therapist and hypnosis practitioner, and she's facilitated over 1,500 sessions using Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique, otherwise known as QHHT, as developed by the late Dolores Cannon. What began as a private practice for Holly has evolved into guiding and teaching through her books and public speaking. And she is also the author of the Higher Self Trilogy, a 3-part series which explores the spiritual dimensions of purpose, forgiveness, and gratitude, culminating in her latest book, Finding Gratitude, Surprising Growth from the Higher Self. I love that title. Together, the trilogy offers a path from discovering purpose to healing through self-forgiveness to embrace gratitude as a tool for spiritual evolution. It sounds like a plan to me. So with that, welcome back, Holly.
Thanks, Carl. It's so great to be chatting with you again.
Wow, 3 years, amazing. And I imagine, like we all do, we've evolved and grown just like you have. But let's go back. Let's actually find out. It's been those 3 years since your last appearance. Tell us what you've been up to since then.
Yeah, so just doing more and more and more QHHT, it's like you said, it was Dolores Cannon's masterpiece. And most of us who are operating as a level 3 practitioner stay very, very busy in the office doing sessions. So I do 3 to 5 sessions a week. So yeah, they add up. And just in case people don't know what QHHT is, that is the kind of hypnosis, it's quantum healing hypnosis technique. So it's Dolores Cannon's healing form of hypnosis. And QHHT session is 5 to 7 hours. So I spend all day with one client. That client comes in with all the questions they want to ask the higher self. So we can think of the higher self as your soul, consciousness, super consciousness, whatever name you want to apply to it, Holy Spirit. And then we go into hypnosis. And the hypnosis in a QHHT session is 2 to 3 hours. And that's where I'm having a conversation through the client in deep hypnosis, the deepest state of trance, having a direct conversation with the higher self to get all their questions answered. And we audio record that so the clients have the ability to then get all of those answers. And it's pretty profound. Dolores said you only ever need one session, but those sessions are in person. And that's what I spend most of my time doing.
Since you were the first, I've had a couple QHHT practitioners on the show now. Tracy Mahan was on here a couple years ago. She's awesome too. She's actually a channel too. However, since we met 3 years ago here, I did, a year and a half ago maybe, I did a QHHT session here in my town in Ohio where I live, but I did it with one of Dolores Cannon's interns. So I went over to her house and boy, I found out it is a long session. I mean, I think mine was 5 hours.
Yeah.
No wonder you only do 3 or 5 a week. And you have to do them live too, right? Because you can't really do it online.
No, QHHT, if someone tells you they're doing QHHT online, they are not doing QHHT.
Yeah.
And that's, so I'm a level 3 practitioner. Tracy's a level 3 practitioner. And what that means is that's the top level. It just means that we've been independently certified to be practicing exactly as Dolores Cannon herself did. So if you go see a level 3 practitioner, the intention is it's as if you're having a session with Dolores.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting when I did my session, I'd never really done that. I'd never really been hypnotized. I can't say that she took me down pretty deep and it was interesting. I can't say it was life-changing, but she did a little bit past life regression with me. I went, talked about a couple lifetimes, which is weird for me because I never experienced anything like that. So it was pretty interesting and well worth it. I really appreciate it. But, one thing that I can say, I'm sure that many of our viewers and listeners have no idea who the founder Dolores Cannon is of QHHT. And you personally trained with her. Can you tell us about Dolores?
Yeah, so unfortunately, she left this realm in 2014. She was in her 80s by then. So her work in hypnosis goes all the way back to the 1960s. And her husband did start with the old-fashioned lose weight, stop smoking, clinical hypnosis kind of thing. And they inadvertently stumbled on some past life experiences. And the way Dolores would tell it is her husband wasn't terribly interested in that. I'm sure being a provider, a dad with 4 kids, he was more interested with the, just keep him rolling with the stop smoking and lose weight. But she was super interested in it, in the past life thing. And so he was in a tragic accident and died at a younger age. And so here she was in her 50s. Kids are grown and she's kind of reflecting on, well, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And she remembered that past life stuff. And she's like, oh, I'm really curious about that. So she went back into the realm of hypnosis, but this time specifically interested in past lives. She ended up creating her own publishing company, Ozark Mountain Publishing, and because nobody else would publish her books, they were so out there. And she ended up publishing 21 books over her lifetime. She still had books in the file cabinet when she passed in 2014. And most of her books are about her research, that she called it research, that she did with hypnosis. So, for example, she wrote 2 books on Jesus, Jesus and the Essenes, and they walked with Jesus, because she had a client who regressed as the rabbi that gave Jesus and John their bar mitzvah. So she went down that rabbit hole and wrote books on Jesus. She wrote lots and lots of ET books, so about extraterrestrial and galactic past life experiences. So Keepers of the Garden, The Custodians, different books on that. She wrote the Convoluted Universe series. So there's 5 books there of just all sorts of craziness about quantum theory and the nature of reality and all sorts of things like that. That's the Convoluted series. And then kind of in the early 2000s, she wrote a book that's really pertinent today, and it's called 3 Waves of Volunteers in the New Earth. And so she was doing research on the New Earth, ascension, the shift. Lots of people are talking about it now. But her work goes all the way back into the early 2000s and late 90s, where she was getting information about, I call it the spiritual evolution of the earth as a sentient being and what's going on the face of the earth now. So that was 3 Waves of Volunteers in the New Earth. But just her work spans just vast, vast areas of metaphysics and spirituality, but all of it coming directly from this deep, deep trance state. And it was only in the early 2000s that she figured out that you could manifest physical healing through this connection to the higher self, to what she called the the subconscious, but not the subconscious in the way that clinicians or psychologists would use that term. It's the soul, it's the true nature of the self that she's connecting with. And we can do all sorts of physical healing in that state.
Well, it's interesting too. You access during hypnosis past life, but also, I guess when you're in the hypnotic state and you're sinking deep, it's almost impossible not to put yourself in touch with your higher divine self, which is where the true spiritual nature of this comes.
Exactly. And so what's important, I think, about QHHT, the first H, healing, is that almost all of our physical situations, and that's what we call them. We don't call them illness or disease. They're just physical experiences. But let's say things like autoimmune diseases, cancer, all sorts of situations. Invariably, they're messages from the higher self that are trying to push us in a different direction on our path. And once we can find out the purpose, the reason for that situation, and then enact that reason, that purpose in our life, then we don't need the situation anymore. So for an example, I had a client in here just recently that was experiencing stage 4 breast cancer. And the higher self told her that it was, and she was a young woman, a youngish woman in her early 40s. Her children were grown, but still she had a lot of life left to live. And the higher self told her that the reason she was having that experience was because she needed to nurture herself. It was time in her life for her to spend on her. She had given to everybody else, and she was given the gift of this experience with stage 4 breast cancer. The higher self doesn't see it as a tragedy, right? That for her to get to know herself, for her to spend time on herself. And that was the message. And she was actually starting to do that. Now, did she spontaneously go into remission from breast cancer in the office? No, because if she didn't start spending the time on herself, then she continued to need the message. And so the higher self told her very clearly, plain as day, in the QHHT session, that once she started devoting herself to herself, then the cancer would go into remission. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think most people have absolutely no clue that these hidden things deep in our subconscious, feelings of guilt and shame and whatever, and lack of worthiness, on and on and on, actually create those blockages in our energy, in our system, in our body system, and causes physical maladies. And well, let's just go take a pill. Yeah, you can take a pill if you want, but that's where the source of all these illnesses and even injuries come from.
Absolutely. Well, and Dolores was so ahead of her time, because in the early 2000s, she named this Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique, because that we're operating in the quantum field. And this, this body isn't solid, right? It's nothing but a coalescing of quantum particles, right? Everything in our reality. Scientists know this, physicists know this, right? They've proven this over and over again. So my body isn't even solid. All it is energy, and energy manifests in a specific dimension at a specific time in a specific place. And once we can understand that any of that energy can be reprogrammed, manipulated, remanifested, and that it is a manifestation in a field for a purpose, for a spiritual purpose. Once we understand that spiritual purpose, then this manifestation of this conglomeration of quantum particles can be reoriented any way we want to.
Yeah, I love knowing that. Yeah, and it is amazing. Holly, for a moment, I'd like to go back and focus on you, and correct me if I'm wrong. I thought this, I read on your website, on your bio, that your current career came through a personal tragedy. Is that true? What happened, and is that what motivated you to become who you are today?
Yeah, and I honestly, Carl, and you probably find this, I think that's true for most people that are on a spiritual path, that have focused a lot of time on their own spiritual development. We often come to this through tragedy. But I started life, my bachelor's degree is in mechanical engineering.
Oh, yeah, a little different.
So I spent the first 25 years of my career in very technical, mechanical, industrial, manufacturing situations in the automotive industry and aerospace industry. And as my kids were getting older, I was in a situation where I wanted to go back to school and get my PhD, and was, trying to decide. I ended up realizing as an engineer that most of the problems in industry were caused by the humans, not the machines. So I had an interest in psychology, but not knowing where it was going to lead me. So I was already finished really with my PhD in psychology in 2010, and was doing some work with mainly Jungian analysis, but also still in the corporate world doing things like leadership development and executive coaching and that kind of thing. And then in 2012, the end of 2012, my son, who was 20 years old at the time, 21 years old at the time, he was arrested for a DUI. And it was a situation where I couldn't visit him, I couldn't see him. I could only have these rare conversations with him. And I was a nervous wreck, pacing the floor, pulling my hair out, just really, really tragic situation. He was in a very dangerous situation, and couldn't really help him. And in one of those rare phone calls, he says to me, "Hey, Mom, I found this book in jail. I think you'd really like it." And it was Convoluted Universe Book 4 by Dolores Cannon. I'd never heard of her before, would never have heard of her. And I started, just Amazon, click, get the book to have a chat, be able to have a chat with my son. And I start reading this book, Carl, and everything I'd ever believed in my life. And there it is in print. I'd never seen it in print before. And I just started devouring her books.
Mm.
And then my son and I, so he spent 21 days in jail. He's doing great now. He's a really great kid now. Not a kid. He's 34 now. But so he got out in December. In January, she was going to be having a weekend seminar. And Dolores would do these 3-day seminars, and she'd do her hypnosis. Like, she'd have 200 people in a ballroom and put them into hypnosis simultaneously. I mean, it was really something to see. And the whole time I'm thinking, this hypnosis, I'm so left brain. I'm so analytical. I'm thinking, this hypnosis stuff is not going to work on me. But I had so much respect for her research. I had research questions for her. And so anyway, of course, in January, we go to the seminar, healing for me, healing for my son, respect for Dolores. And of course, we go into the first journey, which was a past life regression. And I'm in this other life, first person. Carl, I could smell the bacon in this other woman's life.
No.
And I mean, it's just crazy, crazy stuff. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this works. This really, really works. So that was in January. In February, I was in training. I never looked back. I'm like, oh, I get it. This is powerful. This is so much more powerful than what I've been practicing in my psychology practice. So much more powerful. So I never looked back. And that was February of 2013. So yeah.
That's an incredible story. Wow. And you're a true mom. Your son's in jail. You're pulling your hair out. Yeah. You're a true mom. But yeah, glad to hear everything's great. But that is so amazing that you got to work one-on-one with Dolores Cannon. I know she's kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong on this too, she's kind of the female version of Edgar Cayce, yes. Somewhat in
sort of. But she was very clear because, Edgar Cayce channeled himself, yes. Right? I mean, he was a channel. Dolores was not a channel. Mm-hmm. She claimed that, she was not even really, she didn't even claim to be like spiritually gifted in any way, psychic or anything like that. She called herself a researcher of lost knowledge. And she really did see herself as using hypnosis for research. And all of her early books, if you read them carefully, and I think it's really important to understand Dolores's 21 books chronologically, because you can see how she grew over the years. But her early books, the Jesus books were early books, the Nostradamus books were early books. She was very careful to corroborate what was found in hypnosis with like archaeological evidence or other documentation and evidence. She was really into that. And she was very, very careful in her research to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was a researcher too. That's very cool. Well, let's go to you. You're talking about Dolores Cannon's book. Now let's find out about your book trilogy, the Finding trilogy of books. Well, let's see. Number 1 is Finding Purpose, Surprising Wisdom from the Higher. Number 2, Finding Forgiveness, Surprising Healing from the Higher Self. And finally, your newest version of Finding Gratitude, Surprising Growth from the Higher Self. How did these books come about?
Yeah, so the first one, I didn't know it was going to be a trilogy, because if the Higher Self had told me it was going to be a trilogy, I probably wouldn't have even written the first one. I would have been scared off. But Finding Purpose, I wrote shortly after I started QHHT. I became fascinated with how the questions were similar, client to client to client. And almost everybody had this question at the top of their list: what is my life purpose? And then second on the list, what is my life lesson? What am I here to learn? And then third on the list, how do I commune with the higher self? Like after the session, how do I awaken my own spiritual connections? And so it fascinated me how the questions were the same. And then what really fascinated me was how the answers were the same, person to person to person. Of course, people not knowing each other. So that book is a compilation of over 400 sessions and the answers to what is my life lesson, what is my life purpose, and how do I commune with the higher self. So that's what that one's about. And then after that was written, then the higher self came in and went, we got another one for you. And so the 3 books then together become like a spiritual growth stepping stones. Okay, so the first is purpose. Everybody needs to know that they have a purpose, that they're here for a mission, that there is a very specific intention for every single person for this incarnation. And then once you know that, there's so much tension released. There's so many fewer questions, because then you can focus in on what that incarnate purpose is. So the second book then, Finding Forgiveness, I started seeing how the higher self was doing all of this healing, and I mean physical healing, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, cancer, all of these things. They were creating the healing space through a process of forgiveness. And so then in working with the higher self, I began to understand how important forgiveness is to our physical healing, to our to being operating in a healed state. And of course, being the left brain analytical person that I am, when I started seeing the patterns that the higher self was using and the way that they processed forgiveness. And I started going out and looking just from a pure psychological standpoint. Well, how do you forgive? What is the forgiveness process? What's the recipe? Everybody tells you need to forgive. Nobody tells you how to forgive. How do you forgive? And realizing there's nothing out there. Everybody tells you need to forgive. Nobody tells you how to forgive. Not even in the Bible it says you know that you should forgive, but even in the Bible there's no recipe, there's no directions of how to forgive. So that book is a 4-step process that the higher self gifted me of how to forgive. It's a how-to. It's a how-to book on forgiveness. And so we have to think about forgiving others. We have to think about receiving forgiveness. And most importantly, we have to think about how to forgive ourselves. Mm-hmm. So there's 3 kinds of forgiveness. And then in each of those kinds of forgiveness, there's 4 steps. It's see, accept, release, and move. And so the higher self is very specific about what each of those steps mean in any sort of situation that needs forgiveness. And so that's what that whole book is about, is then each of those 4 steps, how do you actually perform it? How do you actually do it for yourself? So lots and lots of how-to from the higher self. So once we know our purpose, our mission, and now we're moving forward in a healed state, the 3rd book came about. And so it's Finding Gratitude, Surprising Growth from the Higher Self. And this one kind of blew my mind. So in conversation, in a session, I started realizing, so over the years, people have gotten more and more elegant or more sophisticated, or deeper in their questions, right? Mm-hmm. I think as the collective awakens and becomes more aware, we've all collectively gotten more spiritual depth and have deeper questions. And so I started seeing this pattern with client questions around spiritual growth. So how do I help my spiritual growth? What do I need to do for spiritual growth? I know I'm here for a purpose. I'm in a healed state. Let's wring all of the juice out of this incarnation, right? Let's make sure it really, it really makes an impact on my soul's growth. And so as I started to get into conversation with the higher self about this, so how do we make the best of our soul's growth? How do we show up? And because that's what we're here for. All of us in incarnation are here to help our soul grow. Our souls are not omnipotent. God is, our soul isn't. And we're here for growth. We're here for experience. And what I found from the higher self is that how we show up to our life is what accelerates and amplifies the ability for the soul to grow through this incarnation. And that state of being is a state of being in gratitude. And so every moment we spend in our lives living in a state of gratitude. So gratitude is not something you journal at night. You know, a lot of us have gratitude journals, but that's not what they're talking about. You know, or blessing our food before we eat it, you know, Thanksgiving and that kind of thing. That's not the gratitude that they're talking about. They're talking about the vibrational frequency that is living the state of gratitude. And when we live in that way, every minute of every day, our soul is accelerated in its growth and can gain so much more out of the incarnation than when we're shut down in a lower vibration frequency. Yeah.
Wow, I love that description of gratitude. Perfect. But yeah, I believe you have your books right there. Can you hold them
I
up?
do.
All three.
Yeah.
Here's Holly's.
So finding purpose. So this is the first. The higher self does recommend you read them in order because they're stepping stones, right? If you're sitting there in a quandary wondering, well, why am I even here? And does any of this matter? Then the other two books are not going to be as meaningful. So first you need to know why you're here. And there's a why. Okay. There is a why for everybody. Then then you got to heal. Finding forgiveness, surprising healing. How do we heal? We heal through forgiveness. And I don't just mean healing your heart. I mean, healing even your physical body can happen through forgiveness. And everybody tells you need to forgive, and nobody tells you how. So this is the how-to on forgiveness. So once you're healed, then what do I do for soul growth? How do I make sure that I'm really reaping the rewards at the soul level for this incarnation? And it's about finding gratitude. It's about living in the vibrational frequency that is gratitude.
Yeah. So yeah, the Finding Trilogy by Dr. Holly Duckworth. I love that. So purpose. And for me, I have found as I've gotten a tiny bit older now, the older I get, I realize, what am I doing? You come to a point where you realize there must be a purpose. I'm here. And so, even just doing this show has helped me to realize that I'm a facilitator of this new knowledge, this new understanding, and it's my purpose. And I do that just in my daily life, talking to people and everything. And then forgiveness, as a long time A Course in Miracles student, which you see behind me here, forgiveness is one of the main teachings of it. Forgiveness is, as the world practices forgiveness, it's kind of like you always say, I forgive you, but, that person saying, I forgive you, is still up here with the awareness that, I forgive you, but you're still guilty. In true, quantum forgiveness or just true forgiveness, it's gone. It really never even happened, and it really lifts a weight off your shoulders. And then finally, gratitude. One of my wonderful past guests and now my colleague in this what I do, Eleni Iambulis. She has an amazing story. She lives in New Jersey. She's turned into an amazing coach herself. Years ago, she was in a bad marriage and abused, and she escaped, and she ended up living in her Jeep, and she could have gone off the deep end and committed suicide or something, but she started a gratitude journal, and then it expanded into, there's more to this, and after doing that consistently and staying in that state of gratitude, which you said raises your energy and your higher self, she became a huge success, traveling the world, doing things and teaching. Yeah. So what a beautiful trilogy.
Yeah. And I love that story, Carl, because gratitude isn't about, the world has to be all kittens and rainbows before I feel gratitude, right? We can have gratitude, especially in moments of challenge and moments of tragedy, because, we have the gift of life. We have the gift of even having the ability to have that tragedy and that challenge. So it's not just about recording the good times. It's about really, what are you going to focus your experience on, even when it's super, super tough? And it sounds like she did that. Lenny did that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, the world right now, as we know it, is seemingly increasingly chaotic and insane. So these things that you're talking about, people can just grab them and use them as tools to live a happier, less fearful life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they're also, all three of the books are just chock full of client session stories, and of course all anonymized, but understanding where my clients come from, and they're coming into their sessions having lived a life and having had lots of challenges, and so I share the very specific words that the higher self gave them to help them understand and unpack these challenges. Even going back to my origin story with Dolores, my son and I now laugh, and he says, he's like, "Hey mom, the only reason I had to go to jail was so you could meet Dolores." I'm like, "I know, thank you, thank you, thank you." So even with tragedies like that, we can see the importance of that with a state of gratitude. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, and it's so true. Of course, you have your own practice in Durango, Colorado, where you live, and I see that besides doing QHHT, you also practice something that's described as non-invasive listening therapy for subconscious healing. What is that?
Yeah. It's a therapy called Safe and Sound Protocol, which was created by Dr. Stephen Porges. And Dr. Porges is kind of the father of polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory just studies the vagus nerve, which is one of the largest nerve systems in our body. And what happens is, especially in modern life, our physiology, this is physiology, not psychology, gets kind of hijacked. And we get stuck, our nervous system gets stuck in a state of fight or flight, or even worse, freeze and seize, just based upon just all the stressors and the traumas that come at us in living the kind of life we need now. And so what very frequently happens is then, this isn't exactly how it works, but it's an analogy. Our ability to go into a nervous system state that we would refer to as rest and digest, it kind of atrophies. We lose that ability. We get so patterned into fight or flight that our body loses the ability to go back into a truly restful state. And so this listening therapy, you just listen for a few minutes a day to music with over-the-ear headphones. There's actually a vagus nerve stimulator inside the music that sends your body into this rest and digest nervous system state. So I kind of say it's like going to the gym for your nervous system. And just amazing, amazing results. I've been providing this therapy for a couple of years now, and just all sorts of healing from things like social anxiety, depression, general anxiety, grief, stroke, retuning the nervous system after stroke, all sorts of trauma recovery. And that's trauma with a big T and trauma with a little t. Work with a lot of neurodivergent people and autistic kids because the world is traumatic for them. And so this listening therapy it retunes your body. It restores the body's ability to be able to get out of that patterned fight or flight or freeze and seize nervous system response. It's really amazing.
Now that non-invasive listening therapy is that something that maybe you like have an MP3 people can access on your website, or do they have to work one-on-one with you to do it?
So it's a subscription to the music that they would get access through me, and then we have a handful of therapy sessions just to get the trick is the right dose of music. So the first few weeks I work with the client very closely to make sure that we've got the right dose of music. We want enough to push the nervous system or to stretch the nervous system, but not so much to push the nervous system. So we got to work really closely in those first 3 weeks. And then it's a 16-week program, and then they listen independently in their own home every day. My doses run between 30 seconds a day, which is usually my autistic kids, all the way up to a maximum dose of 15 minutes a day. And most people do it right before they go to sleep because it puts you in that rest and digest. And most people are like, after they do their listening. And so, yeah, you do that every night, then in the privacy of your own home, just with an app on your phone.
Yeah. What's your website?
So it's awarecaredurango.com, awarecaredurango.com, awarecaredurango.com. There's lots and lots of information. Videos from Dr. Porges. Dr. Porges also works very closely with Gabor Mate. A lot of your listeners might have heard about Gabor Mate. And they have very similar philosophies about trauma and the recovery of trauma. And yeah, this has proven to be a really, really amazing therapy.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned his name. I hadn't thought of him for a while. Who exactly is Gabe Mate? Because it seems to me he's very well known within the in the spiritual and New Earth world.
Yeah, he has some different ideas. So here's an example of one, and I've witnessed this in my practice. So I kind of align with his philosophies. But he's a psychologist, neuroscientist, and who experienced a lot of tragedy in his own youth. He was in war-torn. He grew up in Hungary during the war, and experienced trauma in his own early life, and so had personal experience with that. And then went on to study trauma and the psychology and the psychiatry of that. And his primary concern is our current field of psychology does a lot of work to cluster behaviors into certain diagnoses without doing a fantastic job of understanding the nexus of those clusters of behaviors. And one of those that I really align with Gabor Mate is ADHD. And so psychologists are trained easily and quickly using diagnostic tools to diagnose ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. People that have an inability to finish tasks, pay attention to tasks, they're easily distracted, and find it very challenging to rest, to be in a restful state. And Gabor Mate's philosophy on this is that it isn't a diagnosis in and of itself, ADHD. What ADHD actually is a symptom of trauma. That we're actually seeing a symptom of a trauma response. And if we treat the ADHD, which we often do with things like Ritalin and pharmaceuticals, which do help, absolutely help, but they're treating the symptom, right? It's like taking an aspirin for a headache, but the headache is actually being caused by dehydration. You'd be much better off drinking, a half gallon of water to rid the headache than take the aspirin, right? Because you're just treating the symptom and not the root cause. And so when we give people pharmaceuticals to help with the ADHD, it helps. But what it does is it helps the symptom and it doesn't treat the root cause, which is the trauma response. And when we say trauma doesn't have to mean that you had some sort of horrible physical violence, that you were physically abused or something. The birth process itself can create trauma in our nervous system. Most of our trauma is pre-verbal, meaning it was how our body responded to the world before we were 2. Okay. So you don't have to have been in a war or have had some sort of physical violence for your nervous system to be responding to a traumatic experience. And so then Dr. Porges's work with polyvagal theory and the Safe and Sound protocol is then a therapy for the trauma And then the trauma, once we treat the trauma, then symptoms like ADHD can then be resolved. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, some beautiful, beautiful information. Thank you. Of course, we are talking to Dr. Holly Duckworth of Durango, Colorado, a psychotherapist and a QHHT practitioner. Some incredible information. Back on the show again after 3 years, and glad to have you here. And I know you kind of touched on some of this a little bit, but you've experienced and seen some miraculous healings over the years. Now, are there any other ones that stand out that you might be able to tell us that you've experienced doing the QHHT?
One of my favorite sessions to talk about, because a lot of clients will say, "Oh, they'll have a fantastic session. They'll go, oh, I want my brother to do this, but he doesn't believe in past lives." And I'm like, you don't have to believe in past lives. You don't have to believe in metaphysics. You don't have to believe in any of this, anything like that, any woo-woo for any of this to work. And so I had this client goes back many years ago. And there's so many fascinating things about this session. It was an elder gentleman who was sent to me by his son, and his son is an MD. And dad had a recurrence of bladder cancer. And he had already been through all of the chemo and everything the first time. The cancer went into remission for a few years, but it came back. And so rather than go through all the chemo again, his MD son sent his dad to a QHHT session for healing.
Oh, wow.
Him and his dad are devout Muslims, originally from Pakistan. They aren't into the woo. Okay. They're very, very devoted to their Islamic practice. And his dad comes in. We have a wonderful QHHT session. He was one of these people who, some people, their conscious mind is not aware when they're in deep hypnosis. Most people, their conscious mind is aware. But this gentleman, his conscious mind was not aware. So he didn't know what happened during the session. And I knew that they had healed his cancer. And so I wake him up after 2 or 3 hours and getting all of his questions answered. And he says, right after waking, you might want to go to the restroom, let's have a snack, and then we can talk about the answers to your questions. And so he leaves the office to go to the restroom, and he bursts back in, like he slams the door open, and he goes, "What happened? What happened?" And I'm like, they healed you? Because it was bladder cancer. And so before the session, he had a problem going to the restroom. And then immediately after the session, he had no problem going to the restroom, and freaked him out. He went to the restroom because he didn't know what had happened. And so anyway, I love that story because number one, the MD sent him to me. The devout Muslim did not believe in past lives or anything associated with that. And then instantaneous cure of a recurrence of bladder cancer. And so it was just kind of fun because that his son still sends me clients from their city today.
Wow. That's a great story. I love it. Yeah.
So you don't have to believe in any of it. Just let it go. Just let it flow. Let the session happen.
Wow. Well, Holly, we're going to wind up here in a little bit, but I've just got a couple more questions for you. You're also described as an existential therapist.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah. So that's the kind of talk therapy that I do. So existential therapy is focused on the 4 existential fears. And a lot of our psychological challenges come about because there's a fear that we need to face, that we're being asked to face. And we're doing other kinds of coping mechanisms to ignore it or run away from it. And once we face that fear, then there's a gift on the other side of the fear. So the 4 existential fears are the fear of death, the fear of meaninglessness, the fear of isolation, and the fear of unmet obligation. Okay. And if I look at all of those fears, so I work with people to everyone's going to face these fears. That's why they're called existential. Every human will face all 4 of these fears multiple times throughout our lives at different periods of time. So my talk therapy is focused on helping people understand which of those fears is coming at them at the moment and helping them walk through that fear, not ignore it, not run away from it, but face it. And then there's a gift on the other side of it when we face it. So the gift in the fear of death is an appreciation of life. The gift in the fear of meaninglessness is purpose. The gift in the fear of isolation is connection. And the gift in the fear of unmet obligation is freedom. And so I work with people to understand these fears, to face these fears, to see how these fears are arising in their life, and then to walk through the fear to receive the gift. So that's what existential therapy is. Yeah.
Wow, just more beautiful, beautiful information there. And of course, there are certain buzzwords these days, like quantum. I mean, Dolores Cannon was way ahead of her time using it, but quantum is like a new age buzzword, a new world buzzword. But so is the word spirituality, and it's a big thing in my life. I mean, what is your definition of the word spirituality itself, and what role does it play in your own life?
Yeah. So the literal definition of spirit is the unseen.
Okay.
And so spirituality is just connecting to the unseen. And when you start to realize, and I love that you connected that with quantum, because all of the things we see aren't actually real, but there are real things that we don't see, right? So if I think about the chair I'm sitting in, it's nothing but quantum particles, right? And not even particles, it's quantum energy. They keep smashing atoms together to get to the smaller and smaller piece, looking for the thing, and there's never anything. All they find is energy. So the chair, the very chair I'm sitting in, that's holding me up against gravity, that feels as solid as a rock, is nothing but energy. And our physicists know this, right? Lots and lots and lots of experiments to prove it. So what we think is solid isn't. And then we have all of these spirit guides and angels and councils and access to higher self that is unseen, but is just as real as the chair that I'm sitting in that isn't solid, right?
Yeah.
And so when we open ourselves up to the fact that what I perceive is just a perception, and I can open up that perception to a whole lot more than what I think is solid around me, than what I'm pretending is solid around me, then my entire world can open up to just be so much richer, so much more healed, and I can have so much more gratitude for it.
What I like about you is your passion for what you do is very apparent, and I love that. And not only you, but your clients benefit from your passion on it. And wow, my chair has got particles smashing against each other.
No, not even, just energy spinning.
And everything you said is so in line with my studies of A Course in Miracles that says true reality is in the unseen realm, and that what we're experiencing here as a spiritual being having a human experience is an illusion or a dream, and it's just energy. So, but there we go, enough said. But anyway, Holly, tell us again, what is your website? What is the best way for people to connect with you? And can they get your books there too?
Yes, absolutely. So I sell the whole trilogy cheaper than Amazon. So go to my website. But all three books are available on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible in all the ways. My website is awarecaredurango.com, awarecaredurango.com. All my services are there, all sorts of information about all the services we just talked about, Carl. And then I'd love to connect on Instagram and YouTube. So Instagram, it's just Aware Care on Instagram. And YouTube, it's at Holly Duckworth, PhD. And so I have a membership group on YouTube where we do every month, we meet on YouTube and we do an authentic Dolores Cannon group regression together for the members. So if you want to experience Dolores Cannon, it's $4.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee nowadays. And you can experience an authentic Dolores Cannon hypnosis regression every month.
And all those links I will have in the show notes that go with this show. And just amazing. Dr. Holly Duckworth, glad to have you back on World Awakenings. Thank you for all the beautiful things you do.
Thank you, Carl. We'll do it more frequently than every 3 years. How about that?
Thank you.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.